Welcome back to the Tavern, World Builders. Today we're talking about the science fiction novella All Systems Red, which is the first in the Murderbot Diaries series by Martha Wells. Beware, here there be spoilers for anybody who has not read this book yet. With that, grab an ale, non-alcoholic always available, and pull up a chair. I'm Emma, your friendly barkeep, along with Allison.
Hi.
And Christiana.
Hello.
And we are so happy to have you here. Cheers!
Cheers.
Cheers.
So All Systems Red is about an AI robot designed for security called a SEC unit, SEC short for security, and then unit, who is protecting a science team as they explore an alien planet. The SEC unit has privately named itself Murderbot, which is a inside joke because it has hacked its own governor module and is no longer controllable by humans, though it's still doing its job to keep its clients safe and would rather watch soap operas than go rogue. The mission goes wrong when one of the science team is attacked by a giant creature, and Murderbot soon discovers that information about the hazardous fauna and sections of their maps have been deleted from their survey packet of the planet. And when the team loses contact with the other expedition group on the planet, they investigate. In addition to its security duties, Murderbot has to navigate its own feelings and desire to just be left alone after the scientists learn it is self-aware. Plus, there's the whole someone wants them dead bit. And this was Allison's pick. This one we've actually been trying to do for quite a few seasons.
I think since season one.
Since season one, we've had this one
it,
on the
and
list.
then we had to bump it.
Yes.
We had this one and a book that Emma picked, and we wanted to do them sort of close together.
Yes.
Because I love this book, and Emma doesn't, and Emma loves the other book, and I don't.
Yeah. So we're finally doing it, and later in the season we'll be doing my book. So, yeah. We're already getting into it, so clearly it's time for happy hour. So, we've already kind of stated Allison loves this book. It's one of her favorites, or used to be. Is it still one of your favorites, or has it been bumped?
It's still one of my favorites. I love it so much.
Yeah. This was like my third time trying to start this book. I've started it on 2 other occasions, mostly because Allison always talks about how much she loves it, and both times I just kind of lost interest and didn't. It's so short, and I still did not ever finish it, and this time I had to finish it for the podcast. Man. It was okay. I give it like a 7 out of 10. It's not awful. I would just meh. But Christiana, what did you think of it? The third tiebreaker.
Yes, I am the arbiter. I really liked it, and I also had a hard time reading it. It's been downloaded on my Kindle for like 5 years or something, and I just never actually got around to reading it, and I think it's because it was always mismarketed to me.
Oh.
I have a friend who really loves it, and they always described it as like, Murderbot is so cute, and they just want to sit and watch reality TV and do nothing. So I was like, oh, this is going to be like a cutesy YA little sassy robot story, and I'll read it eventually.
What it is.
No. It is not that at all. No. It is like
it's like Murderbot is so traumatized. All they want to do is sit and watch TV, which is very different.
They just want to disassociate. Yeah. Very different story. I really loved it. If you are listening and you haven't read it, it reminds me so much of David from Alien, but from his point of view. And I love Alien. It's one of my favorite franchises, and it felt very much like you could slot that into the Alien franchise, in my opinion, as a kind of offshoot story, and it would make sense. I really liked it.
I mean, it does have the things you described, like
Murderbot
is cute, not in a YA cutesy way, but in like I relate to this anxious robot.
It's just the way it was described. People were overemphasizing that aspect and not the like space exploration, and there's espionage and evil corporations, and there's giant monsters, and there's guns, and there's explosions. I really thought it was just going to be like Murderbot bebopping around a spaceship being like, screw you guys, I'm watching RuPaul's Drag Race. And I was like, relatable, but yeah.
Yeah, and I don't think we've talked about it or specifically mentioned it in the description, but the reason that Murderbot turns off its governor module is the thing that like basically lets it be controlled by other people. It hacks it and turns it off, and it does this after it malfunctioned and killed a whole bunch of people in a previous mission, which is why it calls itself Murderbot. So it's essentially like traumatized because it feels like it's committed murder. So it hacks itself to protect people. So it's like so traumatized. Also, I should mention that it refers to itself as it in the book, so these are its preferred pronouns. This is not just like a humanist, an anti-robot sentiment.
Did either of you attribute a gender to it, like accidentally?
No. Which is surprising because usually I do, but I did not.
I pictured it as like the robots from iRobot, which is probably not a great, it's not a great example, iRobot. The movie, I should specify.
Yeah.
The book is very different than the movie. But like, that's just kind of almost like a mannequin is kind of how I envisioned it.
I've had friends ask me this and be like, they kind of imagine Murderbot sort of as a female. And I'm like, oh, that's so interesting because this might be because I listened to the audiobook, which has a male narrator, or a male sounding narrator. And so my brain kind of went there. So if I accidentally say he, feel free to correct me to it. But I like that it doesn't have a gender. I thought that was very neat.
Yeah.
Yeah. I love non-binary representation anywhere as a non-binary person.
Also how it doesn't want to be human.
Yeah.
That's so often the robot goal in sci-fi stories, especially older ones.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, like, I'm happy as I am.
Yeah.
I don't want to be, like, all emotional and squishy and,
Yeah, but it still cares about humans, which causes it a lot of, like, anxiety because it really wants to protect its crew, but... they keep doing things that are reckless, which keeps like stressing it out. Because it's like, I'm trying to protect you and you keep trying to kill yourselves, essentially, like when you're trying to take care of toddlers or cats or something.
I have just gotten one of those little Roomba vacuums, and I feel like Murderbot to this Roomba in the sense that like I've assigned humanness to this robot and it frustrates me deeply. Because it'll like suck up an extension cord and I'm like, you did that on purpose. And here I am having to save you, and I just like resent it for it doing its little robot thing. It's like reverse Murderbot and the crew. So I for some reason kept thinking of that while reading this. I was like, that's just like my dumb little robot.
This book is a lot about it realizing that it cares about people as well. It tries to deny it for a long time. Like there's a point where it thinks about leaving them because it's like it's illogical to stay with them because they're being targeted. I could just leave. But then what would I do? And I would be bored without my shows. And like it tries to talk itself out of caring for people, and it's very obvious that it's lying to itself and it's starting to really feel for these humans.
But so I think that's something I really loved about Murderbot, though, is it felt very meta. Like, we as the readers are aware that Murderbot is feeling emotions, but Murderbot is not aware that it's feeling emotions.
Or it's in denial.
Kind of thing. Like, or it's at least in denial about it. It's not expressly stated. And you're like, oh, you little rascal. You're starting to like him. I know it, kind of thing. So.
And then at one point it calls the leader of the expedition, Dr. Mensa, its favorite human. And that just melted my heart.
Yeah, it was very sweet. We're starting to get into it more. So shall we dive into the actual tavern talk here?
Yes.
So we determined that this book falls into the genre of space opera, so we're going to be talking about it through that lens, since that is our focus for this season.
Yeah, when I was trying to determine what genre this was, I actually had a hard time because it doesn't neatly fit into a lot of subgenres, but space opera was the closest, and a lot of the blurbs, like where authors say nice things about it, I'll describe it as a space opera, and I think I read an interview where Martha Wells herself described it as a space opera, so I'm like, well, that's pretty good.
Yeah. I mean, we're finding with most of the stuff we talk about that, like, stuff rarely fits into genre, because, again, like, genre is just, like, a way of, categorizing things for advertising, so nothing will be a perfect fit. And this way we can kind of talk about how it does and does not, fit that category.
Yeah, so I found a really interesting list of things that often make up a space opera. And a lot of them were sort of, older kind of 60s, 70s.
That was kind of the heyday of space opera, right?
Yeah.
So famous space operas would be like Star Wars is like probably the biggest space opera ever.
So speaking of Star Wars, Aliens is a big space opera trope, which Murderbot does not have. They have alien monster. There's that monster that attacks.
Yeah.
Its clients.
But there are no sentient aliens that we see.
As far as we know, I guess we don't know if
as
that
far
monster
as we
is
know,
or not, but we assume it's not. It's more like a big animal than a
I mean,
person.
I've read every book except the latest one, and I believe it's just all humans and AI. There's more AI that come in. So I guess AI is kind of alien. They're not technically aliens,
non-human,
but non-human. And then I really liked that beautiful, like, sexy alien people was one of the tropes. And so I thought that was
Star
funny.
Trek.
I was just gonna say.
Yeah.
So I wrote down beautiful people in quotation marks because I really liked that the novel explores that as, like, inside beautiful people, in that Murderbot is used to this awful capitalist galaxy where everyone's out for themselves, and it's been used and abused by its company that created it. And it's really shocked that the clients it's guarding in this mission are nice to it and treat it like human, and doesn't really know what to do with that. It's very awkward and is like, this isn't normal. And so I really like that. It's just sort of play on that trope that there are beautiful people, but they're beautiful inside. I had a really hard time finding physical descriptions of people.
There are very few.
Yeah, they don't really have very many.
When I was reading through it this time, I was trying to note down even things about the people was hard, and like what their job is. I had, like, it's mentioned maybe once and not at all for some others of them.
Yeah.
I find that really interesting because Murderbot doesn't care about that information. So that information, and it's the narrator, so that information isn't on the page because Murderbot doesn't care, so it doesn't narrate that, like, appearances and things. Even the monster that attacks, you have no idea what it looks like as a reader. Yeah. Which I thought was fascinating because so many sci-fi writers would describe that monster explicitly and, like, have fun with, it's got tentacles, or it's furred, or it's got thousands of teeth, or whatever.
The thing that got me, like, the one description we kind of have, we know it has a big mouth because Murderbot jumps into the mouth.
Yeah.
And then it comes out severely injured and impaled, and it says, I must have injured myself on a tooth, or maybe a cilia. Which are two wildly different things. And I was like, trying so hard to picture it in my head. All I could think of were those, like, newt things from Fallout. Where they have, like, the teeth and the weird grabby tongues with all the cilia on it. I was like, ooh. Yeah.
Something like that. I wonder if that's one of the reasons why I didn't connect with this one as much, because it felt very ungrounded. Like, you definitely, which is, like, the point, because you're in a robot's head. But I'm just like, I feel very much like I'm floating in a head, and there's, like, nothing in this story that, like, grounding which I think, I don't know, I guess it's the point, but it also for me kind of backfired, because it's like Murderbot isn't interested, and then I'm like, okay, well then I'm not interested. Like, this is not interesting because you don't care, and, like, characters make you care, so it's like I also don't care about this.
See, I liked it because I have this horrible habit of, I have a very, very, you know how there's, like, that scale of how you picture things in your head?
Yes.
I'm, like, very far into that. I could, like, picture a bright red apple in my hand right now kind of thing. And so
I'm on the other end.
I picture things very, very clearly, but not based off descriptions, first impressions. They're like, a tall guy wearing a lab coat walks into the room, and I'm like, well, that character is wearing a lab coat for the rest of this story.
No matter what, they're going swimming, they're in a lab coat.
I'm like, now they're in a lab coat. Or, like, I'm like, the one that got my, Emma, you would understand this, Lucian from, like, A Court of Thorns and Roses. And
no, I haven't read Court of Thorns.
Oh, okay.
I haven't read that one, sorry.
Describe this young, attractive guy as having, like, a mechanical eye. And I was like, Mad-Eye Moody from the Harry Potter movies. Done. And that was it for the rest of it. And they're like, he's so young and buff. And I'm like, is he? Just ignore it. So it worked for me in that, yeah.
I've been reading Jim Butcher Dresden Files with my husband because they're his favorites. And there's a vampire character in there. And for the life of me, he just looks like the vampire from Baldur's Gate to me.
Astarion?
Astarion with, like, the white hair. And in the book, he's described as, like, black haired and, like, not at all like
and
that.
You're like,
and I can't get that image out of my head. But that's really interesting because I also see the red apple on the scale. For those listeners who don't know what we're talking about, there's, like, a meme or an image that goes around social media where it's like some people, when they imagine a picture in their head, see this entire picture with colors. Some people see sort of a vague impression or, like, black and white, and then some people see nothing.
Yeah, it's a
spectrum. So there's, like, a picture of an apple depicting those different stages. And I'm also on the I can completely visualize stuff.
I'm jealous.
So that's really interesting to me that Emma can't. I'm really curious if we have readers. I want listeners to tell us if they like Murderbot and then which end of the scale they're on.
Because I wonder if that might be part of it, hey? Without those big descriptors?
I feel like probably not, because we don't really align on other stuff with it. I think it just happens to have fallen this way. But it would be interesting to hear if it does happen to line up that way.
So space opera often stakes are very big, like galaxy or universe ending, even think Star Wars, where like the entire galaxy is being subjugated by the Empire and planets are being destroyed. And Murderbot does not fit that. It's quite a bit of a smaller... well, you know what? At first, it doesn't fit that. Yeah. In this first book, it's sort of a smaller story. But it does get a bit bigger in the later books.
And even this book hints at a bigger problem.
Sort of like the big problem is that most of the galaxy is running on this capitalist system that exploits everybody.
I feel like we say it once a season. It's always capitalism.
Capitalism is the worst, you guys.
Always. It always comes back to it.
And then world building limited to what is necessary for the story and shouldn't overtake the characters or plot is key to space opera. So I've already touched on this a little bit, but what's interesting about Murderbot is it also limits the world building to the narrating character and what it cares about. So like not describing the creature or the character appearance information being very scarce, like constantly confuse characters for each other because there's 7 or 8 humans in the, let me look here.
In the crew?
8. There's 8 humans in the crew and Murderbot. And none of them are really given distinguished anything for me to latch onto, you know?
Mensa.
To remember. Yeah, besides Mensa.
Who's the captain, or like in charge of...
Who's... not captain, but the leader of the expedition.
Yeah, they're
She's
in charge of the expedition. So they kind of have a bigger role in the story. So they kind of get a little bit more of a personality.
Mm-hmm.
So that's really interesting because another space opera trope is your character tropes. So you have like the little girl, the cute little girl, the mechanic, the grizzled warrior. So think like Firefly, Farscape, Dark Matter. Even Guardians of the Galaxy has those trophy characters that they're very quirky and individual and memorable. And Murderbot just subverts that by these characters are individuals, but Murderbot doesn't really care about that, at least in this book. So it doesn't really distinguish them much. You get a bit more of Roddy, the character Roddy, because he constantly talks to Murderbot and tries to get it to open up about its feelings and makes Murderbot really uncomfortable. So I love those scenes. Yeah. But yeah, I think Roddy and Mensa get the most.
Yeah, I think also Gurathan, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that correctly.
Yeah, him too.
They get a whole bunch because they're an augmented human. So in this world, we discover there's robots, augmented humans, and just regular humans. But Gurathan is super suspicious of Murderbot and just doesn't trust him, and Murderbot is deeply annoyed by it the whole time.
Yeah.
Like, I would just murder you. Like, and I haven't yet. I don't get it. Why don't you trust me? So Gurathan is kind of like, I don't think a deep character, but is certainly like the oppositional character within the ragtag crew, which I feel like is also almost a trope in a way.
Yeah.
Whenever there's a ragtag crew, there's always one guy. Even in like the Magic School Bus, you have Arnold being like, I don't know, guys. Kind of thing. Like, there's always one. So,
and then you have, usually in space opera, an uncomplicated black and white villain who's just kind of evil. And you do have that here, the spoiler warning, the evil corporation trying to kill them is called Grey Chris. And they're pretty uncomplicated. It turns out that they just want the money that they could gain from mining civilization remnants on the planet that would be protected if the public knew that they existed here.
Yeah,
so
they didn't want these other 2 scientific crews to find out about it, so that
so they're trying to cover it up by killing the science crews and then making money, and that's pretty black and white.
Pretty black and white.
Yeah. So I feel like that's very space opera.
I'm interested because we've gone through like most of the tropes of space opera, and it kind of doesn't fit any of them except for that one. Like, at what point, because we talk about how, like, you know, all of these things fit into or subvert genre in different ways. At what point does it no longer fit? Like, does this X off enough of those tropes that it actually maybe isn't a space opera, even though
we haven't really hit on. I haven't bothered talking about the main space opera trope, which is being set in space and like and not just in space, but like usually there's a big government or like lots of colonies and things like that, and
which it definitely.
It sets that very well, which is why I think they call it space opera.
Space opera.
So, I don't know. I think sometimes genre is just setting, because we touched on steampunk a bit when we talked about Arcane, and steampunk is just a setting. It's not really a collection of tropes, whereas maybe space opera is a bit more. Maybe it depends on the genre, what it means, which of course is very complicated and not helpful at all when we're trying to define these things.
Yeah. That's a good point, though, Emma. I do feel like it does fall under space opera just because it does fit into that category of, like, there's big colonies, there's a big government, it's kind of a ragtag crew of people up against this big corporation. There's all these different worlds to explore. I think exploration is also kind of part of
and there's
space
science
opera
team, so it's very exploratory in this book.
But then on the flip side, you have other franchises like Alien. This, like I said, this reminds me a lot of Alien, because if you haven't seen Aliens, sorry, minor spoilers for Alien. There is an android. There's like an AI android who looks like a person but is not a person, who kind of goes a little rogue at one point and like tries to create his own life, not necessarily because he cares about it, but because he wants to see if he can. And it's set against this big evil corporation like the Wayland Corporation, Wayland-Yutani, and like they're going to different planets, and then of course you come across xenomorphs and it turns into a horror genre. But it could almost be a space opera in its own way, because it does fall into a lot of those categories. So I think this is another good example of, it kind of depends on, I think for me personally, genre, what the main focus of the plot is, not necessarily the tropes. Because to me, Alien is really solidly sci-fi horror, because the movies focus on the horror element. They could very easily make Alien into a space opera and keep the exact same world, just not have xenomorphs,
different
or have guns more powerful where xenomorphs aren't a huge threat. But the plot would be very different, right?
I forgot to touch on one of my favorite space opera elements or tropes, which is the spaceship, the cool ships.
Yes.
So, you know, you have, like, the Millennium Falcon in Star Wars, and I love Moya. I'm saying that wrong. Moya. I think it's Moya in Farscape, who is a living ship. So she's, like, a character in herself. And so you don't get a cool ship in this book. But if you liked Murderbot, keep reading, because in the next books there is a ship that Murderbot befriends. It's also an AI, and it's so good. It's one of the best characters.
Yes, you do get a bit of it at the end. Yeah,
the very end, Murderbot plugs into the ship and is like, take me to the moon, kind of thing.
I don't think that's
this
the same
ship also
ship.
wants. Oh, it's a different ship. But it does hint at that there's ships that have personality. Because it's like, oh, this ship also wants to watch my TV shows.
Yeah, I thought that was very cute.
Passage with it.
Yeah, exactly. I thought that it reminded me weirdly of something else we're going to talk about this season, Futurama. Spoiler of an upcoming episode. But it reminded me of that episode where Planet Express gets an upgrade, and then Bender starts dating the ship, and then it turns into a totally crazy obsessive girlfriend.
Yeah. I think, like, if I were to give another, like, subgenre to this, because I almost feel like AI robot is almost like a subgenre.
That's almost a subgenre,
right?
Yeah.
And, like, I think that, like, this, you know, this definitely falls into that, because you have, you know, an AI, and, like, one of the tropes that I think is kind of key to that genre is the, like, you know, the exploration of, like, what is it to be human? What do we count as human? Where, is humanity like innate, or is it like something that we like confer to other things, which definitely appears in Murderbot. Like you've got, you know, Murderbot itself doesn't really think of it as people or think of itself as a person, but then different people on the crew all have kind of like a spectrum of how they treat it and how they think of it as being human or not. So it's really interesting to see that explored as well.
It's also really interesting that the character that Murderbot rescues, Dr. Bharadwaj, I believe her name is, has this attachment to Murderbot, which is totally understandable because it saved her life. And so she very vehemently defends it when they're arguing about it later on. So I liked that sort of human component. And then, of course, interesting that Murderbot itself doesn't want to be human. So this question of what does it mean to be human almost feels a bit selfish for the humans because it's not human and it doesn't need to be, but what is it? Because it is self-aware now. Like it's its own being and it is exploring what that means.
Yeah, it's partly human. Well, it's partly organic, right? So it's not just a robot. It also has organic parts. But yeah, it's interesting. And it's also interesting how it's like clearly conveyed too that like humanity is conditional because it talks about how when it has its like helmet closed and people can just think of it as just being all a robot with no organic parts, how that's so much clearer. And then when it opens its helmet, which it doesn't really like to do at the beginning because that makes them see it as more human.
Yeah, there's a point where Mensa asks it to keep its visor down so that the rest of the crew can see its face.
Yeah.
As they're trying to sort of...
Yeah.
Every character is wrestling with what is Murderbot and is it safe and how do we feel about it. And
it's almost like how people treat gender with other people, right? Like they really want someone to perform a gender in a certain way so that way they feel comfortable. It doesn't matter if the person who they're asking to perform feels that certain way or if they want to or if they're comfortable with that. It's like, well, no, I would feel better if you wore a dress or I would feel better if you didn't wear a dress. That would make me comfortable. Doesn't matter how you identify with yourself. This is how we as a group and as a society have decided you're going to present. And I feel like I don't think it was intentional, but I see it as like a tiny little like sub-narrative happening there a little bit about
like performing humanity.
Yeah, exactly. Like Murderbot isn't performing gender, but they are performing humanity, and the humans are the ones saying, I want to see your face. It would make me more comfortable. I think you're human because that makes me more comfortable. Even though it's like, I don't want that. I don't want any of this.
Or the other side, right? I don't want to see you as human because then they even have this talk where it's like, well, are they like, this thing is self-aware and yet it has to obey us. Is this not slavery? Like, is this not wrong? Right? So then it's also like, well, if I don't see you as human, then I can do these things to you, which is, you know.
Well, Murderbot doesn't have to obey them.
Well, they can like punish it. And like, it has its governor module, which then can control it.
Yeah, but like, it's hacked it, so they can't do anything.
No, but this is before that, right? Like they're talking about or they're when they recently find out about the governorship, they're talking about how like in one place where they come from, the Secbots or the units are like free, like
that's
they don't
true.
have to do that.
And in Murderbot's thoughts, it's like they call them free, but they're still sort of they're attached to a human, like they're still sort of owned
instead of an owner. It's called
and
the
it
guardian.
Doesn't like that either.
Like, this is just a nicer word to call it, but essentially it's like the same thing. So
it's super interesting what happens at the end where Mensa buys its contract and it's sort of struggling with, well, I like this person and I trust them, but I still need to figure myself out, and so it leaves.
Yeah.
I really liked that ending.
Yeah. It's like the whole like autonomy versus safety thing that comes up in sci-fi. I think that's a big trope in a lot of sci-fi things too. Is like, is it better to be free or is it better to be safe? And is it okay to take away people's freedoms to make them safe? And like, so that definitely comes up because Murderbot would definitely be more safe with Mensa because, you know, according to all of the laws of the civilization, it would be fine. It wouldn't have to like go do another whatever. If it goes off on its own, it could be captured or like, you know, had a new chip implanted in it. But then it also, you know, now it gets to decide its own fate as opposed to being under someone else's control.
And safety has never been a big concern of Murderbots. If you've read the book, it throws itself into danger all the time. So it makes sense that it would not choose that route.
Yeah. So yeah, like I think that it definitely, I mean, I think we can very clearly say that this genre is sci-fi, and then also, I think also space opera. We've gone through enough of the tropes. That, like, but it definitely is not the most space opera-y space opera. It's like I would call it like a gentle, it's space opera light, or it's a gentle, it's a gentle space opera.
Space opera.
Yeah.
Agreed.
But yeah, it does a lot of that through the world building. Like, obviously, like the character of Murderbot, I think is like the biggest world building thing. Like, there's some other world building stuff that gets touched on, but the biggest kind of world building element, in my opinion, is just the existence of this, like,
the
AI
two biggest
itself.
things are the AI itself and then the sort of capitalist government
colonies.
That's implied, which becomes a bigger thing in the later books. Yeah, those two things. Yeah, I really liked all the sort of techie terms that it used, like hub system, and it talks about sort of how its internal processing works, and when it hacks stuff, it felt very sciencey, even though I know it was all made up. So I like that about that.
Yeah.
It also does not hold your hand. Like, it being the book and the first, like, page, it's just, I went into the hub system and the med system took over, and then this system and as a sec unit, and you're just like, whoa.
What are you talking about?
Yeah.
Definitely, you go into the deep end with all of the, like, lingo.
Yeah, it really throws you in, like, immediately.
Yeah.
Also, the sparse narrative really works well for a novella, because it doesn't put a lot of description in, and novellas are supposed to be short, so you kind of have this whole story, but it
started as a short story
form.
Actually, I was reading.
Oh, did it?
Yeah, it started as a short story, and then it kind of just like lengthened itself into a novella as she was writing it, and then turned into a whole series after that. So I think this is I think we talked about this one with another novella, which was like Pet, where I feel like the length, I feel like if this had been shorter, I might have, again, like, liked it a little bit more. Like, I think maybe for me it felt a little bit too drawn out over the novella. Like, there maybe just wasn't enough grounding for what happened. I don't know. It's always interesting. Whenever I don't like something, I want to think about, like, oh, well, what could
why
did I not like it?
It worked for me. Oh, and it's being turned into a TV show, so I'm very excited to see sort of, because there's a lot of freedom with how they will visualize things, because Murderbot doesn't describe. So
they cast, I think loosely, I've heard Alexander Skarsgård.
Really?
I think that's right.
Tied as Murderbot.
Yeah.
Which, for the listeners who don't know, Eric from True Blood, like big, beefy, blonde Scandinavian dude. I thought that was an interesting choice.
Yeah. I was hoping they would cast someone non-binary, but...
Me too.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I guess.
I mean, the robot is not a non-binary person. It is a robot.
It's a robot with no gender. There's a difference between being non-binary and genderless.
Yeah, exactly. So it would have been cool, but it's also, I don't know that it's necessarily a representation, like, problematic. Like, I don't think it's problematic representation to not have
I don't think so.
Yeah, it just would have been cool if it was
No, it's fine. I just think maybe,
actor.
or someone more androgynous looking could have been.
Although, that's also a thing that's put on non-binary people, right? Is like, you must be androgynous to be non-binary. So it's also interesting to think about, well, this is a very masculine presenting person who is still, you know, unless they go with a gender, they might, you know, and you never know how they might, like, maybe in the TV show.
I really don't.
I would
as a him. That would suck.
Pissed if they did that. But that's why I don't have an issue with it, because as a non-binary person who presents a certain way, there is a lot of pressure to be like, you have to be like stick thin and completely genderless looking in order to be like perceived in the correct way. And also, I do really like, can I say actually enough? Anyways, I do enjoy Alexander Skarsgård. I think if you look at his filmography, he makes some really interesting choices. He showed up at an award show one time in full drag, and since or at a movie premiere or something, and since then I was like, okay, I trust him at least a little bit with this role.
I've never seen him in anything, but I am excited to see what he does in this role.
It also makes sense actually that it would be somebody who is beefy, because this is a security unit, so presumably they would actually be bulky and you know, jacked, because you're a security. You are a robot, but you do have like organic parts and stuff. So interesting. Maybe we'll talk about that on a future podcast when the show is out and do like a compare and contrast. Can be kind of cool. But with that, I think it is time for Proprietor's Pick. So, Allison, what do you have for us? Have you found a space operatic novel for us to
I
read?
have.
Ooh.
For a fantastic space opera, my mind immediately went to the show The Expanse, which I've seen and loved.
Mm-hmm.
It's also a book series by James S.A.
Oh,
Corey.
I didn't know that.
So for today's proprietor's pick, I wanted to highlight Corey's new series. So it's not The Expanse, but it's his new, he just released book 1, just came out this summer. It's called The Mercy of Gods. And here's the synopsis. The Carricks, part Empire, part Hive, have waged wars of conquest for centuries, destroying or enslaving species across the galaxy. Now they are facing a great and deathless enemy. The key to their survival may rest with the humans of Anyan. Caught up in academic intrigue and affairs of the heart, Dafydd Alcor is pleased just to be an assistant to a brilliant scientist and his celebrated research team. Then the Carricks ships descend, decimating the human population and taking the best and brightest of Anyan society away to serve on the Carricks' homeworld, and Dafydd is swept along with them. They are dropped in the middle of a struggle they barely understand, set in a competition against the other captive species with extinction as the price of failure. Whew, big stakes. Only Dafydd and a handful of his companions see past the Darwinian contest to the deeper game that they must play to survive, learning to understand and manipulate the Carricks themselves. So this is very space opera-y, maybe even a little bit more so than Murderbot. But if you like space opera, I think you might like this.
If you like space opera light, you will enjoy this space opera heavy.
Yes.
Full octane space opera.
Yes.
Oh,
Ooh,
and I'm excited to announce, if this sounds cool, you can go to our bookshop.org page and order it from there. And if you do, you will be supporting the podcast, an indie bookstore, and the author. All three. So,
so much support.
Yeah. So the link will be in the show notes, and you can also find it at our website.
So it's actually like your good deed for the day to buy yourself a book.
Buy yourself a book, help out a bunch of people. There you go. And that brings us to last call. So here we will give you some concluding thoughts and questions that we have taken from the world building of All Systems Red that you can apply to your own world building. Allison, what advice do you have for listeners?
Whether you loved it or hated it, Murderbot is a really great example of sparse world building. Think about what your narrating character cares about and what they would notice. And instead of imagining yourself as a camera hovering above the scene, which I think authors often do, myself included, imagine yourself as the character instead and try only describing what they care about. And if this ends up being too sparse in description for the type of story you want to tell, as I mentioned, this works great for Murderbot because it's a novella, but if you're writing a full novel or want to add more descriptions afterwards, then go in and add more after. But this is a great place to start to ensure you're not giving too much information, because I think an issue with sci-fi and fantasy writers is often dumping everything at once because we're really excited about the world we've created.
Yeah.
And so this can be a fun exercise that might help you deliver the right information at the right time.
I know Brandon Sanderson's talked about a writing exercise, which is to describe a scene from the perspective of 3 different characters. Like, describe someone going through town, and it's like, describe it from the perspective of, like, a peasant watching, and then describe it from the perspective of, like, the king going through and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, they would notice such different things about what was going on. And, of course, that also works particularly well when it is a first-person narrative, like Murderbot, where you're actually seeing through one character's eyes. Then you definitely want to be focusing on what they care about. That's
I like
great.
it.
Christiana, what have you taken from All Systems Red world that we can apply to our world building?
Okay, first I want to speak to the Brandon Sanderson point.
Yes.
If you haven't seen Rashomon, it's a Japanese, I believe, film. Very classic. It's a very heavy story, but literally the whole point of the movie is it goes from the perspective, it's a bride who is sexually assaulted, but it also goes from the perspective of the bandit, the bride, the samurai who defended her, and a woodcutter who just happened to be in the thing. And so it's the same story 4 times in a very serious thing. It's super interesting movie. Anyways, if you're interested in that, check that out. But my piece of advice more of a comment than a question, is that it isn't just the world building information that's limited by the point of view, but also the emotions in this story specifically. So even when Murderbot is clearly upset and disassociating, and Murderbot is clearly traumatized, Murderbot doesn't necessarily recognize that they're traumatized, or if they do, they're in deep denial about it. But what that creates is a story that is really, really focused on action in the world, and not just like, boom, explosions and guns and things like that. But what are the physical things that are happening in this world that you built? And I think that's a really interesting aspect of it, and something that you should think for yourself, because my example would be, if you build a world where there's unicorns, maybe your main character is researching and trying to prove that unicorns exist. It would be really easy to write a whole chapter about how that researcher feels about completing their life's work and discovering the unicorns. But what are they actually going to do about it? Are they going to strap a saddle to it and fly off into the sunset? Are they going to report it to the big corporation that paid for their research? Like, what is the actual actions that are happening in that world that you built? It's good to have emotions and kind of get inside a character's head. But this is a really good example of like literally what is happening in that world you built.
Yeah, and your characters really need goals to be shooting for. If they don't, the story won't feel like it's going anywhere. So the character needs to really want something. And what's interesting about Murderbot is it just wants to be left alone.
Yeah.
But it also wants to protect its clients. And so those two conflicting wants
and then its
are what
clients
makes the story.
go and do dumb things. Like,
Yeah. Well, it's
get
it's the whole thing of, you know, you always want to give your character a want, but then the story is about actually teaching them what they need as opposed to what their want is. It's like Murderbot wants to be left alone, but maybe Murderbot needs to have support in overcoming its trauma.
Yeah, exactly. But how does that tie into the world?
Yeah.
Like, it can go beyond just the character. Because in the world, Murderbot, in the world that is built, Murderbot could just be Murderbot.
I'm endlessly fascinated by how different stories work for different people, because both of your advice has like highlighted exactly what I did not enjoy about Murderbot. And I'm like, I don't like any of these things that you're talking about, but other people really resonate with it, which is very cool. That it's like whatever type of story you want to tell, there's people who are interested in it, which is very cool. I will say I didn't hate Murderbot. I definitely like things about it. And one of the things that I took from it that I think is really interesting, and what I think is kind of, for me, the most interesting stuff about sci-fi and fantasy, which is like, think about what real world question you want to explore in your world. So like, for example, Murderbot touches on like, what does it mean to be human? How do we decide what is human and what is not human? How do we relate to people who are different than us or the same as us?
How do we deal with anxiety that we're in denial about?
Yeah, or our trauma, or, you know, so it's interesting because, and none of those are like to the point where it's like beating you over the head with it, and none of those are even explicitly stated, but they just come through as things, and that gives it, especially when we're writing things like sci-fi and fantasy, which can be so removed from the real world, and that's obviously very fun, but since we all live in the real world, we still need something familiar to hold on to, and it's those explorations of like our world through other worlds. It can be really compelling and can really give your story like heart and depth and stuff like that. So think about that, what you're interested in exploring.
I think the heart of sci-fi has always been what if and what does it mean to be human are often the big questions.
Yeah, and you don't have to have answers, right? Like, we don't, like, that doesn't come to it in this story. They never say, oh, Murderbot is or is not a person, or Murderbot, you know, it's just, it's being explored, and that's always really interesting. So feel free to explore things.
Sometimes the real world question could be silly. I always go back to Pacific Rim. What if a robot smacked a giant monster? Sometimes that's also a fine real world question that we all think about when we're in boring meetings, clearly.
So, yeah, there's a lot packed into this short little novella that you can learn from, which is great. So highly recommend reading it if you have not already. But unfortunately, this does bring us to closing time. We would love to stay longer, but these eaves troughs simply are not going to clear themselves out. Thank you so much for joining us at the tavern. If you just can't bear the thought of waiting 2 whole weeks for another episode, you should definitely join us on Patreon, patreon.com/worldbuilderstavern for our world building workshops. These are monthly bonus episodes of the podcast where we build a specific element of a world. And for November's episode, we are going to be building a creation myth. So if that sounds fun to you, you should definitely go check out Patreon. We also have, along with that link in our show notes, we also have a link to help a Palestinian family escape Gaza if you have any funds to spare to help someone out who's going through a really hard time. You can check that out as well. And you can find us on our website, www.worldbuilderstavern.com, which has a link to our TikTok, Discord, and our bookshop.org page, where you can buy the books that we have talked about here on the podcast. We hope to serve you here again soon, but until next time, scram.
Bye!
Get out of here.